Kia ora. My name is Rosanna Raymond, and I am an artist and a fabricator and an activator and a maker of all sorts of things, fine arts and bodily centered practices. And I never know how to explain myself. Sometimes I just say I'm an artist, so sorry. That's me. So, and I lived in England from 1999 and I left in 2014. And when I think about when I met Michael, dates are pretty fuzzy, but it was during a project that I had curated for the Cambridge Museum of Archaeology and Anthropology. And I had worked with a lady called Dr. Amelia Salmond, and we had curated a show featuring 35 artists from Aotearoa. And it also had a performing arts component, which I didn't curate, but Alex Alex, this amazing young German man, curated and brought over 4 plays from Aotearoa, and it was during that time, so it must have been 2007, because Pacifica Style was open in 2006. So I think the theatre-based practitioners came over a year or so later, but we might have to fact check because it was a bit of a blur then. But yeah, there was a workshop in London hosted by this guy called Michael Walling, and I turned up, and yeah, we had a really, really good day. And then after that, we sort of just kept in contact, and Michael was very, very proactive in building up a festival, which he invited sort of the community that I was involved with to be a part of, and yeah, and then from there we did many projects. Yeah, I suppose I really sort of was kind of a bit of a bridge to the communities here, especially the Maori community and the Pacific Island community through. So I was sort of an active member of Ngāti Ranana, sort of the tribe of London that were based in New Zealand House, and they sort of very transient crew, but really the club had actually been going for 50 years, so it was a real sort of centre for just coming together and practicing our culture, and which was amazing. But I was also part of Beats of Polynesia, which was a Pacific Island sort of dance troupe that had a mixture of Cook Islands, Samoan, Fijian, and so I really spent a lot of time in those 2 groups. But yeah, I think that's why I've always been good at weaving people together, so I really, the cultural groups were sort of not used to sort of working in a more theatrical sort of space, so it was sort of a kind of a combination of, I got Michael to come and meet them, made him come to club, so we put him through the test. So it's like, so yeah, so he came to Ngāti Ranana, told them about the festival, how long it had been going, and there was also, can you remember Ants? So I hung out with him in New York in 2017. How's that? Yeah, I know. So yeah, so we made friendships during the festival that was still ongoing, going today. Yeah, so it was sort of a mixture of bringing our cultures and expressing them, but in a land that wasn't yours. So there was always a lot of sort of us trying to understand kind of our space here, and actually border crossings really provided us a space where we could actually come together and celebrate as Indigenous people, but also through really creative and artistic sort of ways, not just through sort of cultural theatre, but through sort of contemporary arts. And I think I did we did a couple of great parties. But yeah, and I'd also developed a celebrating Matariki in England actually. It'd been tickling away in the 90s with some of my friends, and we would celebrate Matariki. But what amazed me is one day I was here, and I remember looking up, and it's very unusual to see stars here. So I remember looking up, and there was Matariki, so Pleiades, as it's known here, and I was so struck by that. And so I created, I think it was called Matariki Kitua, Matariki the Far-Reaching, and that was a night at New Zealand House, and it would bring together the community, and we would just celebrate the coming of the new year for us in Aotearoa, but we were doing it in England, so it was that, yeah, always trying to make sense of like why we were doing things, but because when it came here, it wasn't heralding winter. It was a different for us, but it was still a great time to come together and actually just celebrate our years through the art. So I did 2 in New Zealand House, and then I think the third one we did at Rich Mix.
As part of Origins, yeah.
As part of Origins. So yeah, so Origins, like, and the border crossings really gave us an opportunity to create our own way of celebrating, and just for ourselves, but we could bring the public along. That was a great night. That was great. King Kapisi, a couple of my friends had turned up in town, so we had like DJs, we had spoken word, we had, I think, bits of fashion, we had, yeah, it was like, and food.
Of course.
Always food. So yeah. Then what else did I do? Oh my God, I did so much with you. I really did. Yeah, and I think that was the year that I did Island Part 4, Beyond the Reef. So that was upstairs in Rich Mix, and that was an exhibition I did with George Nuku. And we did that was, yes, we had an opening, and that was a great exhibition. Yeah, creating the opening ceremonies to actually welcome other Indigenous people into the country was not as simple as it may sound, because there was with Ngāti Ranana, the tribe of London, but also inside Ngāti Ranana it was multi-tribal. So a lot of they came from ngā haue whā, from all the 4 corners of Aotearoa. So even in club, sort of establishing protocols that were appropriate, even sort of pan-tribally, was sort of like needed a lot of negotiation. And so then also too, it's a lot of times Māori would be used to like leading the whole sort of protocol, but then we're having to open ourselves to other tribes from other nations, and so it was something that we sort of, some people weren't used to, so we had to really sit down with each other and really dig into why and what we were doing. And so a lot of times we started off with, well, whose ground are we on? And I'd actually been working with some of the, some druids, because I did have to remind a lot of our own people too, that actually as Indigenous people we had to be really mindful of the land that we stood on. And so the first question I'd ask was, whose land are we on? And of course we're in England. But through meeting the druids, who are still the holders of knowledge and histories, and I think, and through them engaging with us, I think even our own people started to realise that England also had a great sort of, 5,000 years worth of culture that had been not lost, not forgotten, but sort of sat in the margins as well. So we worked with I've forgotten his name. I can see Graham Harvey, beautiful man. He was great. it was just like, and there was another young guy too that I had met, and so those two, I brought them into club so that we could actually meet kanohi ki te kanohi. Really important for our people to like meet face to face. And so we built up a proper relationship with the Druid community, and that they invited us to some of their own celebrations. So it was really built upon relationships and sort of, ensuring that everybody's mana was acknowledged. And then we had Beats of Polynesia, who's our tangata Pacifica. So we had our Pacific Island group with the Fijians, the Samoans, and the Cook Islanders. And it was amazing actually to be able to sit with them all and kind of weave a mat that we could all stand on. And even though it was made from many, many different strands, but it was ensuring that everybody sort of acknowledged each other's mana and how, we could mana them. And it was like, it was fantastic. And everybody really got behind it, because sort of not everybody was kind of sold, because they were just used to doing kapahaka, just used to kind of performing. But also the protocols were really strong within Ngāti Ranana and Beats of Polynesia. So it was a really, so these gatherings really brought us together, and as we literally created sort of new protocols for a new situation. So, we knew that we couldn't just rely on the protocols that we did at home, because it actually wasn't appropriate to do that here in England. But it was it was some great learnings, great sharing, and a lot of generosity. I think that we really came together in a spirit of generosity to sort of enable us to kind of open a space that and welcome people, to manaaki them, to show them their mana, and I think that's a really important experience for other Indigenous cultures coming into the UK, because of course the UK represents a lot of pain and anguish for a lot of Indigenous cultures. It's something that, that as a lot of us had been here for a while, that we all wrestled with as well. Where do you stand when you're in the heart of the colonizer? And so there was a lot of, I think it was really important that we did those ceremonies so that people could really settle in, feel sort of some sort of familiar structure of being welcomed, of having food, and it sort of just paved the way for a really good sort of festival, I think. And we got really good feedback. People really responded. Yeah, I've got friends that I've made that I still know today from the festival. So it was amazing. Because we are going back 20 years or so now. Yeah, I haven't really I'm just starting to go through my own archive, and actually just before I came, and Border Crossings is there because I'm looking, so it's really amazing to sit here now and actually think properly about it, because there was it was hard being here. It was really hard. It was hard finding a voice, hard finding a place where I kind of felt that, I could express myself without having to kind of contextualize everything or be the exotic other. There was a lot of, it was quite hard, because there was also here their own histories, and they weren't kind of ready to kind of, I think, kind of go, oh, you guys as well. You had Mama Africa, you have the great, Southeast Asians, you have China, you have so many people that the colony had its little fingers in. So I think, a lot of times we were just another one. that they had to kind of feel some sort of colonial guilt for. But, but I think it's why the arts is such a great tool to use that kind of can really express a lot of really complicated feelings through in a space of generosity. And I think that's what the festival has done and has been doing for a long, long time, sort of providing sort of really different sort of, not angles, but different experiences and hopefully helping people understand sort of some of the pain and loss that's had, but also the joy and the power of creativity in the arts, and how that has done a lot to help sort of people experience Indigenous cultures in a new way. Yeah, because the museum's usually the place that people would experience, say, Indigenous cultures, and it's behind glass, you can't touch it, it's frozen in time, it's sort of usually mislabeled, or with a label that's in 25 words, so it's sort of, there's a lot of loss of nuance, shall we say, in the museum space. And that was a space I ended up working in a lot, and it was sort of quite, not as generous as kind of the festival sort of environment, shall we say. But nevertheless a really important part of our histories. I suppose that was interesting because I'd never been in a kapa haka group before, and it was definitely, we would go and do performances, but often the performances would involve, especially for the beginning, ceremony to open the space, to create sort of some cultural safety. And what I learned really fast is the audiences here they didn't see the difference between the ceremony and the performance. It was just all the same. Especially, I think we did one gig, and it was I think it was for a big travel show, and they wanted the troupe to turn up. And the troupe knew that there was going to be a lot of alcohol, and that there was going to be a lot of sort of, it was in an environment they didn't feel it was appropriate to actually bring the full kakahu and stuff. So when we got there, and then the client was just basically like, it was just like, but you're not wearing, you're not real. Basically, he was like, it's not real. It's not. You haven't got, because we weren't there in pews and things, even though the ceremony was very real. And I think that really clicked something in my head where I was just like, oh, this is really lost in translation here. They're really not understanding who they invited in, or really why. They just wanted you to kind of dance, just get in there and dance, do the thing, and look the part. You've got to look the part. You've got to have your regalia on, your feathers, and you've got to have your moho, and you've got to look the part. And because we didn't, they thought it wasn't as an authentic experience as that they had sort of expected, even though it was actually quite the opposite. So I feel that I started to really kind of, especially I do a lot of body-centered practice, do a lot of spoken word, and I was sort of, I'd been part of a collective, the Pacific Sisters, and and we had been urban, mixed heritage, and we really used the art, and especially the storytelling part of our work to really create spaces where we could develop ceremony that was, and rituals that were appropriate for us in the 21st century. We weren't trying to replicate the past, because actually that wasn't really appropriate for the collective. But also we knew that there's certain things that we needed to do for our own cultural health and safety. And so I really, and through a lot of sort of wānanga and working, especially with Ngāti Rānana too, with some amazing people like Che Wilson. You know, he was looking, especially I was telling you before, there was a lot of pan-tribal where different tribes do things different ways. And so, you know, and people say, oh, well, we don't do it like that, or you can't do it like that because we do it like that. So there was a lot of negotiation within club as well. So that was another really, really important lesson. But essentially working with some really amazing sort of really people who carry a lot of depth and a lot of knowledge, and you know, especially Che Wilson, he was sort of, what some of his words really stuck with me, and that's like that tikanga and kawa, like the protocols were set because it is really, you're doing what is appropriate for the situation. And I think we, especially the crew at that time, we really took that on board because there's some situations where it doesn't make sense to do a full-scale kind of, you know, ceremonies. And there's all sorts of, you know, there's so many. There's the welcoming ceremony, there's the opening ceremonies, closing ceremonies, there's ceremonies for newborns. So there's all sorts. So it's choosing what was appropriate. So when you're all of a sudden in this whole new world and there's a big mix of elements, it was really about, for me, was trying to find what was appropriate for the group who was presenting. And so sometimes there would be people who had strengths in the karanga at welcoming. Sometimes we wouldn't have that strength at all. Sometimes we would have really good whai kōrero speakers, and you know, who could speak in Māori, that could do genealogies from the cosmos and back, and sometimes we didn't. So it was really finding different ways, and also knew that taonga puro was a way that a lot of, especially up north, that if they didn't have the woman to karanga, they would use the taonga puro, like the musical instruments. So it was also finding ways where people felt culturally safe as well. So it was sort of kind of looking at the strengths we had in the room and then marrying that up with the, you know, the reason why, you know, our intention, why we were there. And it would start beforehand too, even before we'd get there. Like, we would have come together, we would have done karakia with each other, and sometimes, you know, we wouldn't have food in the room around the taonga. So it was sort of making sure that these protocols, I suppose they're like transferable skills, like transferable protocols that were appropriate to go into a more theatrical festival space, but still had their deep meaning to the people that were part of the ceremony or enacting the ceremony. So sometimes, yeah, the ceremony would start with Māori, and then beats of Polynesia. Instead of doing a traditional waiata, they would use the drums and the music, so that we were also creating a space so that everybody had a space and a place within the ceremony. And it's very different. That doesn't often happen at home. If you're in Tonga, it's, you know, you've got very defined, you know, Tongan ceremony, and you're with Tongans usually, and same in Samoa. It's like there's, you know, but we're in London and we've got Tongans, Samoans, Fijians, Cook Islanders, Māori working together to sort of ensure that we had, like, I mean, I came up with the term cultural health and safety because I was always laughing because the English was obsessed with these health and safety forms. So you'd get these like massive, like sometimes 5-10 pages of things that you had to, like, you know, will they be using a ladder? Will they be climbing up it? You know, what are the problems? You could fall off the ladder. The ladder could fall down. It could break. So, and I used to laugh because they give us these big forms, but they had absolutely no understanding that culturally they were putting us in situations that were actually what we considered dangerous. to our cultural health and safety, to our spiritual, like having food in the same room as some of our taonga, that, things like that, or making us get changed in places where food was. So it was, there wasn't a separation of what was tapu and what was noa. And yeah, sometimes it really, really did people's heads in, and sometimes we would just, we'd kind of be in these huddles trying to work out our health and safety protocols. So that was it was a really exciting time. But there was, we'd also, as a community here in London, we'd done Pacifica Styles, which was 2006 to 2008. After that, there was Pacific Encounters, so Pacifica Styles was a big exhibition and sort of outreach program. Virtually straight after that, of the opening, almost like a week later, so that was in Cambridge and Norwich, there was Pacific Encounters, which was all historical collections. And that was, again, the community came together. We did a big hangi, food was involved, like we were hosting like people from all over the Pacific. And then a couple of months after that, at the British Museum, there was Power and Taboo. And then even at 6 or 8 months later, in Paris, Musée Cray-Branly. So actually, by doing all those projects together and border crossings, and we started to really sort of understand what we were doing, why we were doing it, and sort of really developed kind of, I suppose, new protocols. But they made sense to us, and they made sense by the people that were enacting them, and a lot of the people, even though we were out here, we would always sort of go, ring up home, ask them if it was appropriate, and it was amazing, because there was all sorts of wild and wonderful things came out of that, actually. And it's something, I still don't see much of at Aotearoa today. You don't see, I haven't seen that mix. It's sort of like, because everybody's in their silos. Everybody's sort of in their silos. What was interesting is, so I came here in 99, and I was sort of working away, and I think it was about 2002 or 3, and I was in Salem. I think it was Salem, at this ASAO, this academic meeting of, I think it's it's like the ASAO, the American Society of Oceanic Anthropologists. And in a really small room there, I encountered Tavita Kaili and Okusi Mahina, and they were talking about this concept of the va, and I was sitting there just like with my whole world just going, like a whole lot of pennies dropping. What is it? I had an epiphany, because I sat there and I just suddenly made sense of everything that I did and how I worked, in terms of how I entered the room, where I chose to sit, how I engaged with elders or young people. And I suddenly understood that I had actually sort of like this really small little word, the va, was actually, it's something that I'd been enacting like for all my life. But now I had a way to articulate what the expectations are within that va, within that social space. So I remember coming home and I was so excited. So I started to dig deep into this, into the concept of the va, because actually it was a word I'd never really heard. My grandmother never really used it. And then I started to look at this va, this really social space, and also the kind of the space between people and things, especially for me working in museums. I was doing a lot of work in the museums, and I had really felt that that these relationships were not taken seriously, and that especially within the way that people engaged with you and then just kind of did a project with you and then it was gone. Or the way that, we would turn up, we would bring food, you would always sit down, you'd after you've worked with somebody, you have your meal with somebody, and these are really important to us. But I suddenly realised it wasn't really the same within the English culture. But now I really had some language that I could to use to really articulate the importance of these relationships, and then how, you te uriwa, you have to sustain and maintain these relationships. So it was great. And then Albert Rafiti and Kosi and Lemi Porifasio and Mama Miriama came, I think, in 2009 they came, and they did a whole symposium on the VAR. And it was really beautiful because I'd kind of been working in isolation, sort of kind of building up sort of in my own way, my own little funny kind of version of the VAR, I think. But I was looking at this space and the relationships that are between people and things, and the things being the museum collections, and how important it was for the museum staff and the curators and the conservators to take the relationships that we have with the collections a lot more seriously. And then after hearing Albert Rafiti talk about the kind of the ultimate VAR is the body through your genealogical matter as the architecture of the ancestor. And I was just like, I knew it. So I started to, it just really helped me make sense of what we were actually already doing. And it's different because I think I'd been working with a Māori community a lot, and they have all those social relationships, but it's not really encompassed in the VAR. It's more manaakitanga and whanaungatanga and stuff. But yeah, just that little word that produced sort of like a new way to articulate kind of this relationships and how important they are to our culture, just helped me propel that. And it made me really understand all the responsibilities that come with working within the VAR in terms of sort of responsibilities, reciprocation, and it was something that I further developed into the VAR body, and that was through sort of meeting Helen Gilbert. Yeah, because I started to look at because I'd been working within the museum space, I put the VAR in conservation, and that's when I started to look at them and actually really demand that they take the relationships just as serious in the conservation of an object as a conservation technique, as a method of conservation. So I sort of went off that way, and I said, and they needed to do that by being constantly sort of involving the community and then really taking these relationships seriously, not just, that's a nice visit, see you later, next, which is sort of, or next project. So I think that's why I really enjoy working with Michael, because it wasn't just we'd do it one year and then I'd never do it again. I did it one year, then did the next, and then did it the next, and did it the next, and it was, for me it was a proper, we had a proper VAR together. It was a proper relationship that we'd built up, that it led to many different sort of things. It let me experiment. It let me really go in and develop sort of some ideas I had, working through the VAR. So then I started to look at the VAR needed a body, and this body is, this sort of corporeal substance of the ancestor that I bring with me into the room, so it's that we're never alone. And it was through sort of working on all these different projects that really helped me just unpack that as I went. So it wasn't book knowledge, it was actually doing. It was through the art of doing, the act of doing, the act of sort of being responsible to the community, knowing that my behaviour too, how that affected our wā noho, like all the different whās came out. But I sort of became and it's become the foundation of a collective that I started in 2010, where I put the wā and the sauvage, and so that as a club's been going for 15 years, but we literally centre the wā, literally within a word that's been used to sort of deride our culture and our and what we do. So it's sort of like, it's kind of leaving the decolonial sort of and really focusing on the re-indigenization, but even within English. So that's sort of, and by then, then I sort of kind of left in about 2014. But yeah, I think like the Island Part 4 at Rich Mix, I think was really interesting to me, because it's a collection of photograph postcards. I call it the flotsam and jetsam of it. And at first it was from like 1990 to 1999, all on the streets of Auckland. So there was fashion shows, sort of all sorts, like really, and it really, I realised sort of that it had captured a whole movement in the 90s, which is quite a pivotal moment for a lot of urban Pacific sort of movement. And then it started again in England, so at the end of 99 to 2014. And so I had a lot of the photographs of all the projects that we'd done. So when I did the Island Part 4 at Rich Mix, what I really loved is, like, when you looked at all the photographs, there's photographs in there that were, it was about 50-50 take photographs from New Zealand and then the UK, but you could not tell what was in the UK and what was from New Zealand, because the faces were Pacific and Asian, and the what we were doing was like, you just, and when I told people, because people go, oh, this doesn't happen here, and I was like, actually, all those that happened here. Yes. So it was this really, it was like not subversive, but it was like, for me, it really amazed me that how we can recreate our worlds, the world building and building the world we wanted to see, and how the English actually helped me sort of look at the kind of my colonial beef too. Is like, because you go, they obviously came over to Aotearoa and the islands, and they try to make it look like home, and that's exactly what we do over here. So it was like, but it was part of the colonial karma. So yeah, but I love that, because it was just it was just that opportunity to be able to show that too, because it was really, really difficult to find a space within the arts, which is a very commodity driven space, and a lot of the work I've been doing has been working within the community or performative, so it's not really commodity driven. It's not something you can just go buy a picture off the wall. What I was doing was revealing a whole world that existed in London that a lot of people didn't know about. Yeah, it was definitely a big part of it. I mean, the museum space as well. And then I was able to sort of take that back home to Aotearoa as well, and it's something. So it was really, I think what I really love about Border Crossings is that it was that the festival, the Origins Festival, was able to show a really diverse range of Indigenous experiences, and they didn't, some were painful, some were funny, some were sexy, some were rude, some were extravagant, some were nuanced, some were traditional, some were contemporary, but it really showed the diversity of Indigenous experience in the world now, and that's also, it was able to bring, the past, present and future of Indigenous practices, which the mainstream was just not interested in. There's a lot of cultural festivals out there, but it's only really just for sort of like, more the folk festival, and everybody's sort of has their sort of, their traditional things, or else, so it was really hard to find a platform that actually could hold the range of Indigenous experiences, in the heart of the beast. In old London town, innit? I don't know, I was suddenly thinking of the scoop today. I mean, that was incredible because we changed the air. The air changed. And that's when I knew that what we were doing had real spirit, that it wasn't what we weren't playing, and I think everybody felt that, and just that I've just got the goosebumps thinking of it now, because we changed the air, and everybody who experienced that really felt like they were part of something. And I know that was a really amazing moment for me, because it had been a challenge to bring and negotiate all the different cultural values and protocols together, and because we were experimenting, it's sort of, but once I really felt that I knew that, the ancestors were truly with us, and that they were like, yeah, let's go, let's do it. That was really important, because it developed, that was, and it's so multi-layered. It's not like, like, I mean, I know I had an installation in there. I was just so blown away that I was just like in the same room as all these fantastic Indigenous artists. It was some spectacular, like for me, Ken Monkman, I couldn't believe I was in the same room as Ken Monkman. So I was like totally girl fanning. But also I'd worked with a lady, Katrina Eggleston, and we had developed a work in Canada together called the Mussy Maidens, and we did this sort of procession that was, and that still sends shivers down my spine. And then I got to work with Ngawha. I think Ngawha and then another collective I'd been part of called Ngawha. It was just emerging, of Samoan artists, and again, Michael gave us a platform that we were able to sort of share a different side of the Samoan culture as well. So that was brilliant. It was huge. Tia Reihana, so I met Tia, because there was a great symposium. So it was brilliant. What year was that?
That was all 2013.
Was that just 2013? Yeah, and then 2014 I go, So
that was a pretty good way to go.
Yeah, that definitely. Yeah, that was. Yeah, but basically, I think it was like every year for 5 years, I was able to to present something, and it was amazing, because there were so many people. You just do something once, and then that was it. So I really appreciated that. That to me was truly working within a VAR. That was somebody who was interested in building up the relationship and actually helping the London-based Indigenous communities, not just the Indigenous that were coming from overseas, because sometimes there's a big kind of line and they forget about the ones that are actually sort of really, trying to make their way in these big cities. It's like, well, come back. Yeah, I got hold of Michael when I knew I was coming. which, you know, it's important to keep up the relationship. When I knew I was coming this time, I really was like, I've got to reach out to Michael. So that was another, like, I can't remember if it was you or me, but anyway, I was like, so that was really good. Yeah, so for me, it's just in the remembering and the actual doing, like reaching out and sort of kind of, you know, helping keep that sort of part of the relationship alive. And it's, yeah, it was great. But yeah, but that project, the 2013 project, Helen sort of negotiated a residency in Berlin at the Dahlem Museum, and that is actually where I truly sharpened my knife with the development of the VAR body. So I'd come out of like the VAR and the conservation, which had sort of been with the museum people, but through the Urban Indigeneity project, I was able to really just have some time and really do some deep thinking within the museum about, and that's when I sort of came up with this concept of the VAR body, and then later on, yeah, I did my master's on the VAR body, academic writing on the VAR, and it's sort of been noted that the VAR was changing as it had morphed into the cities, and I'd had a lot more sort of connections with Albert Rafiti and Tavita, and lots of great conversations. But I remember they were sort of very heavily focused on the social VAR, but that's the Samoan VAR is sort of couched more in the social sphere. But I don't know. I think as somebody with a body centered practice, I keep going, where's the body in this, in the VAR, because it was never mentioned. It was just kind of the VAR, and I think that's when I also, you know, heavily influenced by Albert Wendt's amazing post-colonial body. That was another, I always kind of go, sometimes all roads lead back to Linda Tuhiwai Smith and Albert Wendt, when in terms of decolonial methodologies, and then with Albert decolonizing the body, and he was talking about tatau and what tatau means, and how it, you know, it's this bridges the gap between the ancestor of the past and the present. So he never kind of mentioned the VAR body as such, but I think he painted this beautiful picture, and I think in my head I needed to kind of paint this picture of, I needed to see a VAR body in action, like, so I started to look at it through Albert Rafiti's also gene, I can never say it properly, it's the gene architectural, sorry Albert, it's too witty. So it's like, but like the body is this structure that holds all the genealogical matter. And so I started to sort of kind of, you know, as somebody who you know, has a performative practice, started to really kind of go, well, where's the body in all of this? I mean, the body's the one, to me, that's the physical corporeal action doer of the VAR, like, you know, because otherwise the VAR just kind of sit there in space. But to me, it's the body that activates that space where all the ancestors, and for me, it is an activated space. You need to activate a VAR body. It's like ceremony and ritual, and then you deactivate it. So it's something. So when I am in that doing activations, I look at that I'm activating the space between the past, the present, for the future, and that's this sort of very hyper real space. It's sort of not my everyday body, but you know, that's the everyday VAR. You know, that's just like, you know, there's so many sorts of VAR. That's why they just laugh at us, especially, you know, they're like, VAR? What do you mean VAR? What sort of VAR are you talking about? There's the VAR tapuia, the VAR whialoa'i, there's the VAR, you know, VAR noho, there's the, so But yeah, so I sort of started to, I suppose, try and find ways to articulate what that is, in terms of this genealogical matter that uses the VAR as a methodology to actually activate the space between the past, the present, and the future. Yeah, and everybody's got their own VAR as well. So it was for me trying to create so that we could all sit in that same bar, that same sort of space that where we can acknowledge, the creator and all that's created, and that we can acknowledge all the relationships that we build. And then the hard part is sustaining and maintaining them, that te uleva, that final maintenance of it. And it's a really, I always go, it's such a little word, but it's got a very, very big impact on the way that tangata moana sort of inhabit space. Yeah.
I think I did read that somewhere. 2 letters, but very deep meaning.
Yeah, just two little letters. The va.
Future.
Why do I think border crossings has lasted for 30 years? I think it's because Michael's built proper relationships with the people that he's worked with, and that, it's not usual, and I think he deeply respects the people that he's working with and the cultures that they bring and the stories that they tell and how they want to tell them, which is also quite unusual. And yeah, so that's a lot, and he's sort of he's very collaborative, so he's got a lot. He's flexible in terms of how he works. It's not just my way or the highway, or you do this or I choose that. Like, he really let me develop my own things. He was just like, what do you want to do this year? And I'd be like, ooh, 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 I've been thinking, and it's like, yeah, and he just had a sense of care. Like, he truly cared. So I think that's that goes a long way with Indigenous people, and practices. So I think that's why it's lasted. Yeah, and it will sort of, I think that will spill into the future. Yeah, 30 years, that's a long time to keep something going. How you feeling? Right? But yeah, we were talking before about the next generations coming in too, and I think that's really important.
What does that look like, do you think?
Don't look at me, I'm old. It's classic. It's like, yeah, well, I'm out of the loop. I'm stuck down the bottom of the other side of the world. I read the newsletters.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is exciting.
Yeah.
I'm always like, wow, I'm still going. That's great. Well, it's the next gen's sort of their turn to take us, and goodness, no, we just hang on for the ride. I feel with the next gen, so it'll be really interesting. But also, I think the next 5 years is going to be an incredibly hard time for the world, and in terms of Indigenous practices, a lot. It's getting harder and harder to, with our loss of land, we're still losing language. Our seas is getting more poisoned. Like, there's a lot to take on board with how much wrong's going. So that's why I always think these festivals are really important, because it gives Indigenous voices a chance to actually celebrate and come from a place of joy and creativity rather than a place of pain. And I think that's what will sustain the festival for the future.